All right, everybody, I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon and The Blackest Heart and The Lonesome Crown, all published by Simon & Schuster Saga Press. Today I'm going to be reviewing The Haunted Mesa by LAmour. So this book came out in 1987. It was one of his later novels. Let's look at the cover first. There's a nice little cover painting there. You know, when I did some research on this cover painting, I found out that it was actually done by a Native American, a Navajo that was a friend of LAmour's actually did this. So I was pleased to see that it was represented well, you know. The Haunted Cliff Dwellings is kind of like a picture of the Haunted Cliff Dwellings. Mesa Verde, what this is about, the Haunted Mesa, what is it about? Haunted cliff dwellings, Navajo witchcraft, strange animals and shapeshifters and things like that. If you and it's one of those novels that LAmour wrote. Now this was going to be his magnum opus, The Haunted Mesa. He had done more research and this was his prized. This was his prize. This was going to be the book that he was most proud of. You know, that's what he thought. And then he wrote it, and he was he had set such a high bar for himself. He was a wildly successful Western novelist. And he had set such a high bar for himself when he wanted to write this supernatural horror novel. This was going to be his magnum opus, you know, and he set such a high bar for himself that he just was disappointed. He never liked the book. He's like, man, I wanted this to just be my thing, the big thing that I'm known for. This is going to be the biggest book I've ever done. It's going to have all of everything in it that I've ever wanted in a book. And he was ultimately disappointed in it, which is sad because it actually went on to become one of his most famous books and his most beloved books and most well-read books and most well-reviewed books and his most popular books. But yet at the time he was like very, very kind of like, I didn't hit the mark that I wanted to hit. But it's one of his most cherished books to this day. And it was a wild departure for him to write a horror novel. This has got a very X-Files like investigation to it. What is this about? LAmour got the idea about this because if we know anything about the Old West, you know, LAmour wrote some of his westerns have like a little supernatural flavor to them, like the Californios has this supernatural twist at the end where it's kind of like a time. You find out that it's in a time travel kind of a thing, and it's got like a alternate universe dimensions to it, and he wanted to play that angle up even more in The Haunted Mesa. He wanted to sort of spin that up into a real horror novel, like a real science fiction horror novel based upon a lot of the old Aztec and Navajo superstitions and things like that, where these mesas would be haunted. Like you just didn't go on some mesas in the desert. You know, the mesas, if you know, they're these big, huge rock columns that have the flat top that rise up out of the desert, and they didn't know what's up there, but they had these theory. They thought the old ancients thought maybe it was people from outer space or spirits or anything, but they were always haunted, and they always involved, you know, lost Spanish gold and all of this stuff. You know, the West is just dripping with a lot of legends and mystical legends and mysterious legends of haunted mesas, of lost cities of gold, of all of the spirituality and the skinwalkers and the shape-shifting animals and all of this. He wanted to put all of that in this book, which he really did. He really did encapsulate all of it in this book. And I'm telling you, this book is dynamite. I don't know why he was so disappointed with it. It's certainly, you can tell it's one of his most ambitious pieces of writing. And what he did was what inspired him was he was traveling through the West, and he came, and I will read this little bit that he talks about here. He says, I was in Flagstaff, Arizona, and I was sitting down at this counter, and there was an old cowboy sitting there alongside of me, and we got to talking. And he asked me where I was going, and I said I was taking a trail that was going to take us over east of Navajo Mountain. And he said, oh, I used to punch cows over there, and you wouldn't get me back in that country for all the tea in China. And I said, oh, well, what's the matter? Is it too rough a country? He's like, no, it isn't that. I saw some things out there. I saw some things out there nobody should ever have to see. Naturally, Louis L'Amour was curious and asked him further questions, but the man wouldn't tell Louis L'Amour anything else. It had to do with No Man's Mesa. Now, No Man's Mesa was also mentioned in Louis L'Amour's novel, The Keylock Man. So a lot of the Louis L'Amour books are kind of tied together. The Keylock Man in the Keylock Man, we've got a lone cowboy that's kind of fleeing across the southern Utah desert, and he sees the Lone Mesa, right? And he thinks that there might be something weird with that. Well, it's an actual place. It's an actual place down in southern Utah, and this takes place in modern times. This book takes place in modern times, where a man named Raglan, he wants to find No Man's Mesa, and he wants to see what's up there because he's heard, and then he gets involved in a lot of this, and this turns into he goes out there, finds it, and it turns into a straight supernatural thriller horror novel, much like an X-Files episode. And it's just great. It's like an X-Files investigation filled with, buried, like I said, buried Spanish treasure, skinwalkers. Even I in my day, when I was a young kid living in Sevier County, Utah, I would go with my grandpa. Believed in this stuff. My grandfather believed in that there's old Spanish treasure out here, and we're going to go find it. And he would take me out into the deserts, and we would go look for caves and old Spanish treasure. And we never found it. We found a lot of arrowheads and things like that. But this book is an amazing history lesson just on the old Southwest. It's just an amazing history lesson on that stuff, all of that mystical stuff, filled with just a great and gripping horror novel on top of that, where these haunted mesas, man, and the stuff that happens, and I loved the opening of this. Let's just read the first few pages of this thing here. It was night, and he was alone upon the desert. It had been over an hour since he had seen another car. There was a Navajo family in a pickup. He shivered. What was the matter with him? Ever since leaving the highway, he had felt a growing uneasiness. He had not traveled hundreds of lonely roads before this without fear. Was it an old memory? Was something haunting him still? Why should that be so? It was only a story told by the old man at a lunch counter. So he's incorporating that story of the old man at a lunch counter that he had into the very book. He had heard many such stories and spent a good part of his life proving them all to be illusions, fabrications, or misunderstood phenomena, or just crazy people with crazy stories. But why had that one story clung to his memory? Why had that old man in that restaurant clung to his memory? He drove slowly, watching for the turnoff he had been warned would be hard to find. The road was a mere trail among low sandhills, with the dark outlines of square-edged mesas looming against the sky. So, you get the sense, all right from the beginning, we're just like, hey, this guy is out. He's heard the story from the cowboy. He goes out to disprove all these natural phenomena, or these supernatural stories, UFO sightings. That's his deal, to go out and disprove it. But yeah, he's just like that one story from that one cowboy about the haunted mesa. He just had to go back. He just had to figure it out. And it is, and this book deals a lot in alternate universes and other dimensions, and the Indians believed that when you get to the history, like I said, this is a history of the Old West, and he talks about the legends of these ancient Indians and how they believed in alternating universes. They believed that these shapeshifters, these coyotes and things that would shapeshift into different animals and humans, that they were from other universes, that they were coming through portals. And they believed that. And he's like, it's juicy. This is one of the best, and a lot of people don't think of Louis L'Amour as a horror writer, but this is a horror novel that will just blow you away as any Stephen King book would blow you away. So here's another passage I wanted to read to you about, The idea of parallel universes in the Old West, they never knowed who it got through, and I fought shy of that country ever since. This is another conversation with the old cowboy and the cowboy saying they never knowed who it got through, and I fought shy of that country ever since. He's talking about a portal. Who got through the portal? I tell you, boy, there's things about this world nobody knows. That there desert now, them mountains around Navajo and east of there, that's wild country, boy, wild. There's places yonder you see one time and they never look the same again. There's canyons no man has ever seen the end of, nor ever will, either, unless they get through to the other side. He's talking about the portals. What's the other side? That's what I said, boy. The other side. Folks are forever saying there are two sides to everything. Well, why should there only be two sides to everything? Why not 3 sides, or 4, or 100? I don't know nothing. I don't even claim to know anything. Only I stumbled onto something mighty strange out yonder. I figured on it some, and I spent some months just watching and laying low. I ain't claiming I know how it works, but I know when it works. I don't know what causes it or how much things can be seen, but it works from time to time. Trouble is, they knew, the ancients knew. Somehow, the ancients knew. Only by the time, they were talking about these portals to different universes, and it's multi-universe. I mean, there's time travel, multi-universe, there's monsters, there's shapeshifters. Oh, it's a wonderful, wonderful horror novel. One of my favorite books of all time. Just is great magical book about the modern Southwest and a chase for the old Southwest and the supernatural mysticism that is just in the currents of the air. I give this a good 9.5 out of 10. It is just great.